talk about problems with buildings and financial problems that have made some headlines lately, but first we'll talk about something that this all comes down to. It comes down to student success and student performance, and then EQAO tests, which are the standardized tests the province gives to certain grades in all schools in Ontario. Parry Sound children in Parry Sound schools have not fared very well, even when you take into consideration factors like income levels and post-secondary education levels among parents, as one study did. We don't stack up very well against some similar schools. Why is that?
I really don't have an answer to the question as much as almost every research you do on it, you will find different answers. My own personal feeling is that standardized testing for any of us in anything is something that, okay, if I am going to university and I'm taking a course and absolutely you assure everybody that the course is exactly the same day by day and the teachers do it the same day by day, that okay, you can have a true consensus, you can have a true understanding. But I think that if you set up a test in the city and then you convert that to, say, a rural area,
Right.
that you can have something as simple as understanding a sentence go right out. Example being, put the ladle away. Okay, unless you know that a ladle is a spoon, and that your family, your friends, somebody said it somewhere. If you were taking a test that asked you to explain it or make another sentence
Someone
with it.
mentioned the example of the subway. Some people in rural schools might not really know what the subway is, and if that's in a question, it could become difficult. But to narrow that down, I guess to a certain extent, that problem's been acknowledged. And so the C.D. Howe Institute commissioned a study by a professor at a reputable university. There's always skepticism about these studies, and studies probably should be taken with a grain of salt. But this study aimed to take away those factors and compare a school like the McDougall School with a school with the same community around it somewhere else in Ontario. And when you do that, near north schools, particularly those down here in the Parry Sound area, did not do well. So while there's skepticism about the tests and skepticism about the studies, if we're doing our best to compare apples to apples and Parry Sound's not doing well, what does that mean?
Well, I would think the other component, unfortunately, could be the teaching itself, how the teachers and that relate to the students. If you have, say, students that live in the rural area and there's bus cancellations. I mean, this year we had 3 or 4 bus happen in 1 month, sometimes twice in 1 week, and those kids don't get those lessons, and then all of a sudden you have a test, and they'd never been brought up. So different things like that. That's why I find it so difficult to really understand. Also, as you were saying too, that some of the parents themselves do not have the education, and that is a component there. That's why I really promote parent groups in a school, because if there is something like that, maybe you can have a parent component come into the schools and help the teachers and stuff like that.
Do you think, particularly as the board's struggling with very tough financial decisions, we have a potential deficit of $5 to $7 million, reserves have been depleted, that takes a lot of the board's attention and efforts. Does that make it difficult to concentrate on programming and what's going on in the classroom when you've got such a big issue like that and issues like buildings that are deteriorating?
I think although you've got to think of the buildings, you've got to think of the declining enrollment. Before you think of anything, though, you have to know how many students you have, what grades they're in, and the best way to work with those children, because your goal is for the children the children come first, and then, so in other words, you have to have the teaching staff, prorated to class size and all that. Then you start thinking about, unfortunately, whether you keep a school or close it down, or about busing or something like that. But it's kids first. You've got to think of what you can do.
That's why I'm wondering is, have we reached a situation where we have a bit of an emergency on our hands? Because there's no doubt that budget problems are taking up a lot of time from administrators and from other duties like programming and students first. And there's students sitting in classrooms right now, and we wonder whether they're missing something they should have, whether it's additional programming, additional staff, or just more attention to the structure of education within the system. Is this an emergency? We have poor EQAO tests, we have budget problems. How dire is our need to find a solution?
Well, I think it is absolutely important because of the fact that we have to work under that financial restraint. Let's say the government says that you can have this amount of money, and regardless of how many schools you have, you have to adapt to it. But I do think that the government, in all their understanding, lacks to think that there's a big difference between, let's say, 50 some odd schools in the city area and 50 or 60 schools in the Northern District alone.
Right.
Like the near North District, the schools are spread all over the place.
That's a good spot to take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about provincial funding for schools, in particular our schools, in just a moment.